Welcome back to Squawking Dead, my little goslings. Did everyone stock up on shitting pants? Because I ran out sometime between Simon filling Gregory's stomach up with his love and Negan and Gabriel's great walker escape. Episode 5, The Big Scary You Unknown, continues the slow transition from our initial quartet of intense episodes to the dialogue-driven scenes we know and love. However, we still managed to get a crazy explosion and a helicopter flyover. I mean, I called it that they would have a mid-air firefight in our last episode, but I was totally kidding. Now might be a good time to remind everyone that we still haven't seen a single flash forward yet, and I personally predict that one of these flash forward scenes will show up completely out of left field and only at the start of some random episode near the end of mid-season break, because that's the way these abusive writers always roll. I mean, my friends keep telling me that I need to leave them, but they don't know them like I do.
No, they don't.
After probably saying goodbye to King Ezekiel in our last episode, letting him rest for a little while, and with the kingdom now silent, faith in our beloved team's plan will be tested. The scent of civil war is in the air. Gabriel and Negan are sniffing out each other's weaknesses. The savior lieutenants smell a mole. The taste of loyalty in the mouths of the sanctuary workers has gone sour, and Gregory's belly is full of Simon sorghum pancake batter. And yet I smile. I smile because I just got the news that our podcast is now on Google Play Music. You can search for Squawking Dead in the Google Play Music store from the podcast section, or head over to our SoundCloud page and click on the handy-dandy link in our profile. There's also a new menu on our Facebook page called Squawking Dead Episodes that cuts out the middleman and allows you to stream the show straight from there, along with buttons along the top that will take you to our Apple Podcast, Google Play Music Podcast, and even our Twitter profile when clicked. As always, it is my honor to introduce the starter of shows, leader of the Judith Resistance, bearer of dark humor, Carol.
Ah, what an intro to live up to. Jeez, where to start? I think this was a pretty straightforward episode, but this is what I called it. I've been calling it for the past, 2 weeks? I was waiting for this Negan Father Gabriel confessional thing. The Catholic in me told me that this was happening. I could feel it in my spirit, and that's what we got. It wasn't to the full extent of what I was hoping for, but it was a step in trying to get a little bit more idea where Negan's coming from, which I appreciated. But I did think it was interesting to kind of show a lot of dissension and mutiny in the ranks, and not just between Rick and Daryl, but also just among the saviors too, which I thought was kind of interesting, how they're experiencing similar issues on both sides, and also showing how, ironically enough, Negan and Rick seem to have similar mindsets of, we can't just arbitrarily kill people, the way it seems that Daryl and Simon seem more okay with. Negan and Rick, ironically, are not. By no stretch of the imagination would I necessarily compare the two, because Negan is very much a sociopath, regardless of that. No matter how you cut it, he is a sociopath. But it's interesting, the parallels that they were trying to draw. I was like, all right, I see what you're doing here. Okay. But I thought it was a pretty straightforward episode. I mean, there were a few kind of like, what is this helicopter all about? You know. But, we'll get to all the specifics of that. But I thought it was pretty straightforward. I thought it was definitely a nice setting up for the next coming episodes, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and even from the start of the show, the one thing that I called, it's not a stretch of the imagination that they would actually start rewinding the show from the beginning of the season, practically what happened in the trailer. Well, to do that, we need to actually go back in time, because time has moved forward like at least, a handful of hours from the time, Rick stormed the armory and Kingdom stormed didn't really get to storm the chem plant, which we called the heavy artillery warehouse or facility. So,
and I will say that I think that The Walking Dead does a good job of illustrating time. I'm usually pretty clear on where we are. They do a pretty good job of kind of making it clear, like, okay, this happened at this point. When we see Gregory talking to Simon, and, we kind of understand, like, okay, this must have been when Gregory went there. And then when eventually they go out, when Negan and his lieutenants go out to the balcony, we kind of realize, okay, this was their vantage point from when Rick and the group attacked the sanctuary. So we have a very clear idea of where we are in the timeline.
Right. As opposed to the first 4 episodes, where sometimes it wasn't very clear.
Right. It was a little disjointed, disjointed.
And nobody knew what was going on, and where are they? And literally in our chats back and forth, we were kind of like, where are they here? I'm going to have to rewatch this episode, because I don't know what's going on, especially with the kingdom. I just don't know.
Right, exactly. We weren't necessarily clear on what the missions were and where they were going and what outposts were they going to, especially because they had so many different factions of like, the Jesus group and, the Kingdom group. And it was like, where are they all? What is the mission? What are they trying to hit? So I think that this episode was pretty clear cut. Okay, we're at the sanctuary. This is a Negan-centric, savior-centric episode with some Rick and Daryl also in there.
Yeah, with the vein of Rick and Daryl. Oh, speaking of veins, how many penis references, man? That's just...
Jeez.
Such a phallic-y, penis-y, veiny, throbby...
How do you feel about that? Because there are a lot of people that are split on it. No. I say that because in the comics, he very much is like that. However, a lot of people feel that it doesn't translate as well to screen, that they feel that it's a little gimmicky, because, in a comic, like, you can get away with certain things because you're talking about just like a panel and the dialogue needs to jump off of a panel and you can get away with outlandish sort of dialogue. Whereas on a screen coming out of a real human being's mouth, sometimes it just doesn't translate the same way. So I know that some people are sort of, kind of not necessarily feeling it, but then, the purists like the fact that, some of the stuff is like word for word from what's in the comic.
Yeah, I'm not really split on it. I can see your point. I can see your point about having it be a little bit too much, but I will say one thing. It's as long as it's really limited to Negan in a way, I don't know if it necessarily matters. Like, if it's just one character on the show and that's his thing,
yeah,
it doesn't bother me as much. Although you did get hints of that, let's say, from Simon and the other lieutenants, let's say, in the group. But even that is more of an illustration of how, okay, let's say like Simon is the almost Negan,
Right.
So you get hints of it, but it's not quite the same as when it comes out of Negan. Negan, it's overt, it's obvious, and
right.
I think it drives a point home. And I think he knows he's being obvious too. He kind of alluded as much in this episode as well.
Yeah,
the idea of him being that character, that guy. I mean, he says, he basically says, Gabriel just fires back. He says, "You're the asshole," and he goes,
right.
"Yeah, I know."
Yeah, no, yeah, that is
he
very
knows
true.
what he's doing, and like especially at the end, which I mean we'll cover. I just want to cover the lines as they come out because they're just so. I actually ended transliterating them like word for word. It's because they're just so good. They're just so funny.
Yeah,
which is again
comical.
Something that they needed. Yeah, they needed in this show a little bit to just keep inserting this left and right, because I think part of what they're trying to recover from the last few seasons is the barren lack of humor in the series.
Well, who always interjected his levity was Abraham. Abraham, I think, did a very good job of sort of like interjecting this sort of kind of macho kind of like, I don't know, terms sometimes that were so ridiculous, but they were just funny. And I think he definitely, for me, like, I miss Abraham for that. Like, I think he had moments that were really funny to me.
Oh yeah, and even Eugene, who's been like largely absent until now, and that was kind of a nice little relief. Like even when he was being deadpan, he was just a funny, ridiculous character.
He is definitely a funny,
unbelievable.
He definitely is.
I don't know about you, but I was looking at the Gabriel in his church scene, and basically saying, what I fear is a fruitless death, and what I ask for after you've given me so much is purpose. There's a part of me that does not like that scene, and I'll tell you why. It's the idea that they've just inserted a concept just randomly for there to be a vein, like this clear vein for Gabriel, like this clear purpose. I don't like having to say this. I do like it, but it occurred to me like after watching it like almost 3.5 times that I'm like, oh wait, they could have maybe even done without this scene.
They could have.
You know what I mean?
The show has been accused quite often of basically kind of like spoon feeding, like the purpose of what they're trying to do. It's like, I don't think it was necessary to do. I think we get it. I think we've seen Gabriel's arc on the show. So it's like, I would buy that, okay, he is looking to basically redeem himself from the coward that he was at the start, and basically make sure that even if he dies, that, he's done some good, beforehand. I didn't necessarily need it to understand that. I get it, what they were trying to kind of illustrate. I was like, I saw the scene and I was like, well, what have I been saying? I'm like, Gabriel's not getting out of this alive. It's like
every episode. He's done.
So basically, this was just kind of like, yep.
Yep, of course. Of course.
That's about right.
Who's responsible for this scene? I really didn't need it. It just wastes my time. We know what's going to happen.
We know what's going to happen. It's like, it wasn't, it totally wasn't needed. I understand what they were trying to go with, but it wasn't needed for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there are, like, it's kind of like I was saying to you before the show. The show is fairly cut and dry. In terms of even analysis, I don't really have too much. But what I will say, what lacks for subtext, it makes up for in cinematography and scene construction. Because the way that scene transitions, the way it's filmed, the way the camera pans, the close-ups to Gregory, Father Gabriel, I'll get to Gregory. To Father Gabriel, he seems to have a lot of up-close face shots in so many scenes, and he's such a pivotal character in this episode. And unlike a lot of people, I actually, even though Father Gabriel is not, most people would regard him as a throwaway character.
I don't think so.
In some respects. Why can't he go away? That feeling, he did. So, like, for me, I actually enjoy characters like that are done in such a way that they disrupt the show in a way. Like, they disrupt the progression of a certain group, a certain character. And Gabriel certainly did that when he was introduced. Like, who is this guy who managed to live this long?
Right.
And then they meet up with this guy, and he's playing catch-up. And he's playing catch-up really fast. And, of course, you run into problems. But the way he comes about, he has his moments, and they're really sticky. But having the turbulent nature of him having to catch up the way he did, and then reaching to this moment, it's kind of exciting to see. Literally, the title of the show is The Big Scary You, which is unknown, which is something Gregory says. And to me, Gabriel is the very definition of an unknown in that respect because of who he is. So I like disruptions to the show. Sometimes I like those little annoyances,
Yeah, I do, because I think it keeps you on your toes, Like, I think that there are certain characters that you can pivot pretty easily, but you don't know necessarily what direction they go. I mean, you could pivot Gabriel in several different directions, and I think that's what makes him interesting. Like, you're not necessarily sure. You always, like, have a bit of a doubt with him from his background, and, yes, he's had this arc, but, a lot of people kind of thought, like, oh, could he be a mole or this or whatever? Like, I mean, he definitely keeps you on your toes. So I don't think he's a throwaway character either. I think he's an interesting character. I think he can be a frustrating character sometimes, but I think that makes him compelling.
Yeah. I don't think many people will agree with us there, but I do like. You have to appreciate it for sure. You have to appreciate it, even though you're just so frustrated by it. Sometimes.
Right. Exactly.
But, I kind of laugh at people that get frustrated at Father Gabriel. I'm like, enjoy.
Yeah, he's still here. Sorry.
Yeah, he's still here. Yeah, definitely. Oh yes. Because you know where I'm gonna go. I'm actually going in chronological here.
You're gonna go right into your guy. Okay.
Oh, I'm waking up in the sanctuary. Oh, where am I? Oh.
By the way, side tangent, did you know that in real life, the actor who plays Gregory, which is Xander Berkeley, and the actor who plays Simon, Stephen Ogg, are roommates in real life, and they produce different things together, like side pet projects? Yeah.
They're like the Odd Couple?
Yes.
Please tell me they're like the Odd Couple.
Yes, they are. Isn't that hilarious?
Chemistry. Holy crap.
Yes, yeah. They're roommates, and they work on all sorts of pet projects.
I'm wondering if Ogg was in... There was that Hulu series that Xander Berkeley largely starred in, and it was I think it was called The Booth at the End, and it was this really great series. I think it ran 2 seasons, but it's like 8 episodes a season or something, and it's literally in a booth in a diner. And this is how talented Xander Berkeley is. He's this guy that can make things happen, basically. And you don't see any scenes except the ones in the diner. It's just 2 people sitting across the table, and he's there all day just drinking coffee. And somehow he's able to manipulate these people's lives, the people that come in and talk to him, that they know he can make things happen. And it's just this fascinating thing. And this is kind of like the reason why I like Xander Berkeley. He has this range. He has this way of pulling you into whatever character he plays. He's just demented. And so now that I know that Stephen Ogg is part of that, I kind of want to go back and see if he was ever involved in any of those episodes in any capacity, because now I just want to see it. How did you find this out?
I was listening to one of the radio shows I was listening to in the morning, and they were talking about him, and they mentioned how they interviewed him. One of them interviewed specifically Stephen Ogg, and Stephen Ogg was the one who told them that they were roommates and that they work on these projects together, this kind of stuff. I was like, wow, who knew?
Oh my god, this is like something I'm going to look up before I sleep tonight. This is great.
I'm telling you, it exists. It's true.
Oh, that's Gregory and Simon too.
Can you imagine?
Like a sitcom? Yes, of course. It would be like a sci-fi sitcom, like a very campy / dark humor sitcom. But yeah, it would be in my brain. Something I'd invent.
I think, but it writes itself.
It does. Hence that scene with the wakey eggs pancakey.
Yeah, I mean, like this is their life, like on a regular.
Yeah, that's literally Simon does it. You know what? I can see Xander doing it to Simon every day, and then Simon, I can't wait to get into the scene because you do this to me every goddamn morning.
Right. Yeah, you know what? You're totally right. I could totally actually see that. Actually, I do love this scene though, because it's like Stephen Augustus. He's such a bizarre creep, or the Simon character, the right-hand man. He's menacing without being overtly menacing. Like there's just something menacing about him.
Suggestively menacing.
Yes, he's suggestively menacing by not anything that he's not overt in anything he's saying. He's not threatening, but there's just an air of menace that gives you that fear that you don't know what this guy's capable of at all.
Yeah, because there's a lot of love on that tray.
A lot of love. A lot with the sorghum. Again with the sorghum.
Yeah, fill your belly up with my love and then you'll solve it. Like I wrote all these lines down. I'm like, oh man, this is delicious.
Just love on a plate.
Oh, and then soon to be in his belly.
They do seem to like pancakes at the sanctuary though. Didn't they make pancakes for Sasha, like her last meal? I think it was like pancakes that they brought her over when she was in the cell.
Well, they may have even mentioned it's sorghum too. Yeah,
you never know.
Because she was at the Hilltop before they left to the sanctuary.
That's right.
You should be familiar with these pancakes.
Again with the pancakes. No, they're looking pretty good at the sanctuary. Pancakes. I mean, hey.
It's what's for dinner.
There you go.
Oh, it makes me hungry. Yeah, other than the overt creepiness or the suggestive, menacing dialogue between Simon and Gregory, I can appreciate that scene because it sets the table for the next scene. With the lieutenants. But
yes.
I like how he mentions the sanctuary. The satellite outpost. I feel like a lot of the things that were said in this episode between Simon and Gregory, between the lieutenants amongst themselves, is they really tied in the first 4 episodes, and then going back what these stations represent, who runs them, and so there's something pretty cool about finally wrapping all those threads into a bow and finding out how they work and who runs them, what are they for. That was kind of cool. It was nice to kind of put a face to the name, that sort of thing. Be able to name a concept.
And also to just see like who these lieutenants are. This is like if you were to have like a upper management meeting in the conference room. This seems to be Negan's cabinet of members here. So it gives you an idea of like, okay, who are his closest in command, and it's okay. So this is the team right here.
The upper echelon.
Yes, I do appreciate that Gavin consistently seems just not into this at all. He's just very passive, and like as soon as like they open the door to the balcony, he's like, Jesus Christ. When they go out, and later on in the episode when they hear about the workers basically revolting, he's like, oh God. I'm like, this guy is just he is
like,
over
do
it.
I have to do something? Man.
He's like, he's one of those, he's middle management.
Yeah.
He's middle management. He's just trying to do his job, and now he's like, oh God, I have to deal with this.
He's like the dude at the post office that after every person he takes, he just takes a little lap just to piss off the next person. Just kind of like, do I have to do this job? 5-minute mandatory break. He doesn't want to have to do this.
He doesn't want to at all.
Yeah. I mean, he'll do it. He will do it. He won't
begrudgingly so.
I think that's when he gets mad, is when he has to do it.
When he has to. Exactly.
Simon makes him do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the little dialogue between Gregory and Negan, and Simon in the middle. There's something so menacing about it.
I did appreciate that. I think this is what I was talking to at the start. Like, you definitely got at that point a very clear idea. Like, there also seems to be like a little, I'm curious to know what the origin or what the backstory is between Negan and Simon. Because when Simon tries to interject and kind of say like, look, we'll go in with a show of force, we'll kill all these people, whatever, and Negan mentions something like, are we backsliding or something like that? It's like, what is
backsliding here?
Yeah. I'm like, what does that mean? What happened in the past that, are we backsliding? I'm curious about what
let's
that
talk about this for a second, because some people have theorized, and I was theorizing it at the moment, because actually, I mean, I called it back when we were talking about it in the first show, how I had always perceived Simon as kind of an almost Negan. He has the authority, he has this, he doesn't have quite the authority, obviously. He doesn't have quite the charisma, let's say, even. He is certainly charming. You know, he certainly has an appeal about him. He's affable. You know, he's approachable. Actually, he's probably more approachable, and maybe that's a slight weakness, but it doesn't harm him in any way, you know, as far as we can tell, because he does his job the way he does it, and he doesn't do it, you know, he doesn't try to shoot for the goal. He doesn't look to be ambitious. He knows what his role is, and he just goes for that role. You know, he does what he's going to do and is at the best of his capacity. So what some people had theorized, and what I'd kind of thought from the beginning, was that it seems to me that he may have been the original leader, let's say, of this group of upper echelon people, and you know, the people that basically provide the workers with sanctuary, which is obviously something we're gonna get to in a minute because it's big. But
very interesting. That's an interesting theory, though.
Yeah. Or that there was at least some sort of incident where he was given more power than he previously had. Like maybe he had more authority in the Saviors, maybe even before they were called the Saviors, or maybe he did run things and Negan kind of just took over. You know, so it's a prevailing theory. I mean, that's what I think. I mean, I think there was some sort of capacity or some sort of mistake that was made as a result of trusting Simon or giving Simon that level of responsibility. So
interesting.
What do you think, though? Because I feel like you must have some thoughts on that, because
I that dialogue didn't go over my head either when he mentioned, like, oh, the guy who was in charge before. I don't think that's throwaway dialogue. Very few dialogue in The Walking Dead is usually throwaway dialogue. It's usually stated for a reason. So I think eventually we'll kind of get a little bit more info to, like, when he says who was in charge before, like, who was that, you know? And I wonder, when you say that now, it does make me wonder, you know, what the extent is of Negan and Simon's backstory is. How far back is their relationship go? Have they known each other for a long time? Ooh. I don't know. You know like,
I just thought. Sorry to cut you off, but
no.
I was even thinking, could this even be some sort of, you know, Julius Caesar situation where Negan and Simon planned a coup, you know, because the guy that was leading them previously kind of led them down a stupid path, you know, and maybe that's the backsliding.
Highly possible too. I mean, I think both aspects are very much possible. Yeah, I would kind of lean towards thinking they could have been in cahoots to do a coup. Simon, the way he made it seem like in his dialogue with Gabriel, he made it seem that whoever was in charge before let people be weak. And Simon seems, whoever it was, and it seems that Simon is, I would say, almost maybe possibly a little bit more ruthless than Negan, in the sense that he seems to have a little sympathy for, well, you know, these people are innocent people, so, you know, he seems kind of like, well, whatever, if we have to go in and, like, kill all these people, then we have to do it. Whereas Negan seems to be more like, nope, you know, that's wasted resources, like, we need more people. So maybe Simon wasn't necessarily the leader from the past group, but I could buy it that they were part of this group and they decided, like, well, this guy's just not doing it, we need to kind of take charge. I can see that. Let's keep going with this people are a resource thing. Like, I love this line, because I just want to repeat it because I'm going to be a cliche like in every podcast. So people are a resource, money on the table, people are the foundation of what we are building here. So you have to really kind of examine that, because something that you said is the people, whereas Simon might think that people are an obstacle, people are a hurdle, people get in the way of what we want. It's not about what we want. People are the means to which we can get what we want. And this is like Negan's philosophy. So, I mean, people are that natural resource. We are nothing without them, in a way. You know, if we can't make them feel like they're important, relevant, and take care of them, we're not doing our part of the deal, you know? And if we're not doing it, they can't keep doing what we need them to do for us, you know, which is the most important thing, you know, obviously. I mean, as a resource, I think it's the seat of their power, and it's a precarious one, albeit, you know, like they're making promises of protecting these people. Yes.
You know, they're fueling the workers, you know, to keep running the machine,
right? You
know, and at some point there has to be a fall off, a drop off point to where they can't really commit to those promises. You know, at some point it's gonna run out. The way they're doing business is it's a model is not sustained.
No, it's not a sustainable model. Yeah. No, and it seems like, yeah, that is their premise, the idea that people are a resource. And, you know, and it is interesting, you know, I think at one point during that dialogue, he mentions to Simon, like, have you forgotten what this was all about or something, you know? And so I think that there, at least in Negan's point of view, that there was this grand plan of, like, you know, we are reorganizing civilization, and this is how we're going to do things. It's a society based on rules and punishment and reward, and this is how we do things. And I think it's also very interesting that they mention in his conversation with Gabriel, he used to work with kids. Yeah. Which also sheds some light on other aspects too. But in terms of the idea of punishment, reward, I mean, for all we know, he was a school teacher. Who even knows?
Yeah.
So it does all kind of, like we mentioned, like these kind of little bits and pieces are starting to weave together a picture of where he's coming from. And it seems like his decisions are not arbitrary. It's all very deliberate and planned out. Even if he has to execute somebody, it's done in a certain way for a greater purpose rather than just like, we're going to go in and kill all these people, So I think that he definitely has a vision in mind and a goal in mind. And I think it's something that Simon doesn't necessarily see, just the same way that Daryl doesn't necessarily see where Rick is coming from or doesn't necessarily agree with it. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and I mean, I'll get to that. Just a couple of things, though. It's this idea that you meld this idea that people are a resource and this other idea where Gabriel and Negan have this exchange where he says, or even, it's Gregory and Negan, and he has this exchange where, like, Gregory says, as much as we both hate killing people, and he goes, well, it's not that I don't hate killing people. I like killing people. I like killing the right people. Yeah, I think he says that in a menacing way, yes. But I don't think he means it in a menacing way. Like, obviously, he has to still come off the way he comes off, but I think that he really does mean that. I'm all in favor of killing the right people, Right. It's just that the subtext to that is that I don't like having to kill people at all. In fact, if we go back to Father Gabriel even, it's that his main thing is converting people's weaknesses into strengths and strengths that will benefit him and the saviors. I think his whole shtick is a sham. It's a sham. He's not all about the murder and the balls and the penises and the show of force. His whole thing is to kind of project a sense of safety for everybody, like an icon. And then, in the background and also on a one-to-one basis, he's really trying to give people purpose, and which obviously, in a way, Father Gabriel wants something, fruitful death, a purpose. Right. So these are all kind of interweaving things, and we're starting to see, I think the backstory that really, the essence of his backstory really boils down to a sum total of really, he does at least respect people, the concept of people, the strengths and weaknesses. It's a mix, like he says, and his whole shtick is to take it and convert it into a resource and to make them useful, and maybe the trick here is whether he's doing this for himself and his personal benefit and keep order, or if he's really like a humanitarian, that's what we're trying to figure out in a way, it determines his basically. So
I mean, it's deep, man.
How did we get here? I mean, like, I'm just thinking about, like, oh, we don't have that much to talk about in terms of getting really deep. And then here we are.
But you know what, though? Like, they did give complexity to the Negan character, which is what they needed to do. So, there is definitely an air of complexity now, which I appreciate. So, I think that the episode was cut and dry in the sense of like, okay, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, and we're moving the story along. But I think that Negan is a very complex character. I think that that's what they're trying to go for anyway. But this guy is not as cut and dry as necessarily one would think. There's complexity there, which I hope that they continue to develop further and further. And I think that they will. I think that these were little pieces of Negan to kind of throw out there to kind of give us an idea of where his mind is at, and then they'll continue to build on that. I hope.
Well, what if this is one of these things that we saw the last two episodes? You get this perspective of Ezekiel, right? Mm-hmm. The 2 episodes ago, we have this impression of this hopeful Ezekiel making speeches and smiling and telling others to smile. And then the very next episode, you tear him to shreds. Yeah. And then maybe in this episode, we're seeing Negan we're being spoon-fed this image of Negan in all these different facets and these mechanics. The idea that he's converting people into resources. He respects those people, ergo resources, does not wish to kill them unless he must, and even better, if killing them actually saves, hundreds of lives, he's all in favor of it even, so we're really getting this, this deeper idea, we're really peeling back the layers that make up this gruff exterior, right? But what if the very next episode we get this macabre birth of, we throw Negan under a pile of bodies, and then out comes this post balls in hand Negan, and
that would be
he
pretty
gets torn to
crazy.
shreds.
I mean, that would be pretty crazy. I mean, I think that we'll definitely get more depth with him, but I think that they're going to hold him as this ruthless leader for sure, though. I definitely think so. I don't know, but it's like, I just feel that there will be another spectacle made of somebody by the mid-season finale, or for the mid-season finale. I don't know. I do. I have a suspicion.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, my comic book, not spoiler, I don't know what to call what it is when I feel like your comic book sense is tingling. my radar is going off.
Comic sense is tingling. No, actually, I don't think that there was anything in the because they've deviated from the comics in the sense of the way that they're doing the war. So there isn't really anybody that I would say right now would be, the reason I say that more so is just because he just seems like, first of all, there's a lot of suspicion, and I don't know if Eugene is in the best place right now. I mean, Eugene, he definitely seems to have suspicions or trying to figure out like who among the rank is feeding information. And obviously Eugene is an obvious target for the fact that he's just, he's not really a savior. He came from Rick's side. So what's to say that he's not, playing both sides or whatever, just how he accused Gregory of playing both sides, So at the end of the day, like I wouldn't be surprised if somebody, like Eugene or somebody might fall on the hands of Negan if things continue at the way that they are. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily a comic book spoiler because Eugene doesn't die during the war. Eugene in the comics does not. Eugene in the comics survives and keeps going. But however, what I will say though is that the Eugene in the comics is very different from the Eugene on the show. Like the Eugene in the comics is a little braver, is a little bit more kind of stands his ground, where Dr. Eugene Porter on the show is not the most brave individual. So right. I don't know. I mean, again, he's one of those characters that I don't necessarily know what they could do with.
Yeah, I mean, they could completely throw us a curveball and just completely change this character, because there's deviation and then there's complete surprise, which in a way would be in the show's best interests if you think about it. To not see even, let's say, Eugene suddenly being killed, to not see that coming, that would be bananas. And I don't think it would actually hurt the feelings of comics readers in a way, because there have been subtle changes, but this could be a good opportunity to go into the big, the big scary the big unknown, to be able to put these characters in a situation that we couldn't have possibly predicted,
right.
Especially using comic knowledge, and especially even looking at the scene, it would be the most obvious thing for Negan, just on a logical standpoint, to really suspect Eugene, right?
Right, exactly. From pure logic.
Yeah, so it would be a logical conclusion. Part of us thinks, that's not going to happen because it's so obvious, right? So obvious. But then having it happen, that would be, and having it in, like you said, the most spectacular way, where it's, and like he even says, it's killing the right people in the most wrong way possible. Right. That would be, like watching Glenn and Abraham all over again,
right.
And
exactly.
in such a way that it, that it would just rock the entire universe.
Right.
Ratings would go through the roof. So I'm not suggesting that they do that,
but they could.
But yeah, they could, and then it would be and this goes with anything really. But in this specific scenario, and it's mostly because I'm thinking in the back of my head, having not read the comics, that not that Eugene will die, but there's this struggle in my head that I'm leaning more towards him being not good. As much as I want him to be good, I feel like until that last scene at the end, I was just thinking to my head, he's gonna try to get all the information as possible, see either why Dwight's doing it, and find out whether the situation can benefit him, like by ratting Dwight out. Maybe kill Dwight and change the story completely. I know it doesn't happen in the comics, thank you, but
I was a little concerned though for like Eugene, like when they discovered that there was paints on the bag with the weapons, and Eugene had paints on his hands. I'm like, dude, you better wash that off like super quick.
Yeah.
Talk about.
I wasn't even thinking that far. He was looking at Dwight a little weirdly. Like
he put it together.
I better rat him out before they just default to blaming me.
Right. Yeah. He definitely put two and two together and realized, okay, Dwight's the one who's the mole in the group.
I just got to figure out if this overall, and he's, to give Eugene a little credit, I mean, he's a smart guy. We talked about this in the first episode. He's a pretty smart guy. You know, he's probably trying to do like fifth dimensional chess here. Even though the most obvious choice would be to rat Dwight out for his own self-interest, I don't think it's that simple. He's probably thinking of the ramifications of doing so. Like, okay, right. I rat Dwight out. Who's to say that I can't be, the very next day, I automatically still become primary suspect number one again, you know, even though Dwight's gone, you know, so you're damned if you do sometimes, you know, and you're damned if you don't. So again, Eugene is probably thinking of this scenario like left, right, and center. But then now we have, as of the end of the show, we have a Father Gabriel that's in that holding cell, and he's asking for the doctor. He's saying, you better get that doctor out of here no matter what. Right. And that really throws everything into whack, because as much as Negan wants Eugene to solve the situation at the sanctuary, a situation that has ramifications that go far beyond people's lives, you know, it's a matter of, again, the resources and getting the workers to kind of quell down, you know, and calm down. And to do that, it's the idea that the saviors have to save them. You know, they have to do their part of the job. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on here that can go wrong. Does he abandon what Negan says? Does he get the doctor and take him to safety to the Hilltop for Maggie? So there's a lot going on here. Like, and really, it can go in so many different wild directions at this point. So that is something that, quite honestly, is related to the comics without getting too into it. Dr. Carson is a major player in the comics. Did I say Carter?
No, I think you said it right. I thought you said Carson.
I thought I said Carter. So I guess Dr. Carson. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, man. Because I'm thinking of Downton Abbey, and never mind. I watched Downton Abbey, and there was a Dr. Carson, and I will not bother Walking Dead fans with that. Oh, very different. Show, yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm so glad you watched it. Okay. Like, I thought I was a crazy man rambling into the ether.
No, not in the least.
Okay. You say Dr. Carson is a very important character on The Walking Dead.
Downtown Abbey.
I'm sorry.
Different podcast. Yeah, no, he is in the comics, so I suspected that he would be on the show, especially because of the fact that when they captured Dr. Carson, it was made like a big show. Like, oh, we're taking the doctor and we're bringing him over and all this sort of stuff. So it was made, and also, like, quite honestly, you can tell which actors are kind of like throwaway actors and which ones are like going to get more screen time. Personally, I'm like, yeah, this is a doctor, but this doctor kind of has like MacGyver-like qualities or looks to him. I'm like, this guy is going to be like qualities. Yeah, I don't know. Like, he seemed like. As you choke on your beverage,
like dying. I'm just imagining Richard Dean Anderson taking the role of that post-fact.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Carson, even though you met me earlier.
If all of a sudden they like get him for like some random role on The Walking Dead, people are gonna like pass out.
Yeah, I will lose all bowel functions at that point.
Oh, we're like, yes. They'll be like, yes. People will like lose their minds. They'll be like, yes, this makes total sense. This is exactly the kind of person that you need in a zombie apocalypse. Like a MacGyver.
Yeah. For me, it'd be #Soiler alert.
Soiler alert. Oh my gosh.
I'm waiting for the canned laughter. Oh, it didn't come up. Okay, whatever. I ain't mad at you. Anyway, so.
But yes, this Dr. Carson definitely has some sort of qualities that made me feel like, we're going to see this guy again. So the fact that Gabriel mentions you have to get that doctor over to Maggie makes me feel like, okay, this guy is going to be a piece of the fabric of the war. That's my thought.
You know, and as that thought travels to the Hilltop, let's say, just for example, I think having a doctor there would be beneficial to the peacekeeping situation in Hilltop. And just having one there, and having the saviors that have been captured know that now they have possession of the doctor, this expensive football of a person, that whoever has this doctor, and there's no other doctor that we know of, has a certain amount of leverage, you know, and as we're talking about leverage, you know, we see the garbage people have been approached by Rick.
Yes.
And this was the last play that Daryl was talking about when they parted ways. Like, you're going to play this last play? And he's like, yep, I don't want to, because they suck.
I knew we were going to see these damn people again. Yep. I just want to understand their backstory. Like, why? Why you're not using prepositions? Like, I want to understand, like, where this, like, it bothers me. It does. There's silly talk.
Yeah, it's just garbage talk. Garbage talk from garbage people. Trash hipster.
But I want to understand how these people have access to a helicopter. I want to understand this.
Okay, so the chopper thing is particularly interesting to me because in my notes I freak out a lot when I see it.
Yes.
I literally write martial arts fight, car chase, explosions, and now a helicopter. I'm like, this is like taking the page out of like a John Woo or James
Michael Bay.
Cameron, Michael Bay, type of film, and I'm like, things
Here we
you'd
go.
never expect to see in subsequent, sequential episodes of The Walking Dead.
Black helicopters. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen, I've seen, since I've seen Fear the Walking Dead, I've seen helicopters, and I know it's only, a couple months or several months after the apocalypse started.
Right, in their case, yeah.
But having the fuel and the pilots available, there's something about that's a little unnerving after, let's say, a couple of years, I suppose, in this, down south, the heat.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, when I saw the helicopter, I mean, we've seen other scenes where, we see like army personnel and things like that. And we've seen it lately. Like, I mean, a lot of the weapons that, like those, what was it, the RPGs or whatever explosives that they got for, what was it, Little Timmy and the Dig Brigade? That was like, I mean, that is what they called them,
Yeah.
Like, that was, like, I remember Abraham kind of pillaged it off of some sort of, army soldier, walker, or whatever. And even when Michonne and Rick had their little kind of side mission, they were looking to get him. The carnival that had these kind of like random dead, soldiers with weapons or whatever. And Michonne mentioned like something happened here. I wonder if there's any correlation with the helicopter and these like soldiers. Like I wonder. I mean, it might not be, because obviously in the case of something like this, then obviously you had like all the army and forces trying to kind of defeat, this threat. So it may not be at all related. But I wonder, if there's any correlation.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have a force out there, and yeah, we have seen RPGs. I mean, we even saw like a nice amount of weaponry when, what was his name? When Rick finally met Morgan again for the first time.
Right.
For the second time, I guess. So it's there, it's out there. It's just a matter of getting it. And obviously, the Saviors have been stockpiling this stuff for a while. So the helicopter just doesn't seem well. And that's the other thing. They mentioned a flyer in the lieutenant's meeting, I think, with Negan, or when Simon, I think, mentioned that. Well, like, worst case, we'll take a flyer over and just kill them all. And I'm thinking that's what they're talking about.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, and if that's the case, maybe it's on loan from the garbage people. Maybe that's, they have that in their junkyard, which stands to what possibility, because I mean, it's a junkyard. They've got tons of crushed vehicles and things that they can turn into vehicles or patch up and repair, and that would be probably the best place to look to kind of fix something that was broken pre and post apocalypse. So, and it probably makes sense that they would be the people to go to. They'd have to be somebody there with welding experience and engineering and whatnot. Right. So that makes sense. And also the chopper was coming from that direction towards the sanctuary, I suppose. From where Rick was standing. Like, Rick was going towards that direction. The helicopter is going the exact opposite direction. So there must be some sort of relationship with that. Like, and the fact that they didn't want to have to use that option initially, the flyer, means that they'd probably have to tap a resource they wouldn't want to have to tap.
Right.
These garbage people, they always want something.
Yeah, you can't trust them. They'll flip it on you they'll flip out on you on a switch.
Don't know how to speak good English, but they certainly know what they want, even though they can't express it properly.
No, not in the least.
Now, I guess fight means sex. I don't know.
Yeah, I was very surprised at Michonne's reaction there. I'm like, God, Michonne, you're just gonna let this shit talk like that? But okay, alrighty.
Just let it roll off your back, man. Just let it roll off your back. Just get out with your skin.
Yeah, she did. They just barely made it out alive from that.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious to see what happens with these garbage folk.
Oh yeah, I'm okay with it now. I mean, it doesn't bother me as much because I haven't seen them in a while. It's kind of like that record that you played and it's kind of good, but please don't play it again. Like, okay, I can wait now because I have that 1 8-minute track, and you don't want to have to listen to the whole thing.
Oh, but if it's been like a few months or something, it's like, all right, it's fine.
Yeah, it's like November Rain. Like, I'm okay with it.
Like, I'm okay with November Rain, but it's like, yeah, like in here and there.
Yeah.
No.
Not like the way they were playing it back when we were kids. Like,
No.
oh, again? 8 minutes. Come on. It's like
They used to play that video all the time, every day that thing was on.
no shame. No shame.
No. I mean, I loved it at the time, but I mean, yeah, that thing was like 8 minutes.
So there's one thing that I want to just throw out of the way, and that's, I'm like going back towards Gregory and Negan again. I love the relationship they're having with this political character. As much as Negan likes, as we know now, does value people, there's something to be said about his reaction towards a politician. Like, on the one hand, oh, I could totally waste this guy. This guy is antithetical to who I am as a person.
Right.
You know, there are elements in a politician that are clearly present in Negan.
Yes.
You know, the idea that you need to kind of manipulate people into thinking your way in order to push an agenda, right?
Right.
But I think that Negan at least tries to appeal to their better nature to actually access something that benefits them, right? Whereas Gregory will just say, this is the way, there's no other choice, you know, he'll be affable, he'll make false promises, and I think that's what really burns Negan up a little bit. It's like all the bluster and none of the backing.
Right.
You know, there's no way that Gregory there's no force behind his words, and that's what, like, it almost pains Negan to keep him alive in some respects.
Yes. Well, I think he doesn't respect him, and he find him spineless, and he doesn't necessarily know what value he has as a person.
Like, are you the guy? You know, you certainly don't seem like the guy, and you know,
he brought up very good points. If you're the guy, how in the world did this woman come and basically completely like undermine your leadership and then lead these people? You know, if you are the guy and this is your community, how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Even the idea of him entertaining this conversation and not killing him right away speaks volumes about Negan. If you think about it, he could waste him. But you see, the thing is that it goes back to something that he said about, you know, if I kill this one person, it could save hundreds. Does killing Gregory save anybody except a headache from Negan? Right. So there's no purpose. It's not a fruitful death. Oh,
yeah, it is not a fruitful death.
Here we go. There's some connections being made.
There you have it. No, it is true.
Yeah, we're seeing parallels between Father Gabriel and Negan now. But yeah, I think Negan feels that the usefulness that Gregory has almost run out. Like, he's wondering, you know, and maybe this can be used maybe Gregory can be used in a different way. And by the looks of it, I think they're trying. And we know where Gregory ends up.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, we do. We know basically where we know from the timing where he all ends up.
So I really do wonder what the deal is. You know, what's going to happen with that relationship.
Yeah. No, I do. I do wonder. And I think it's very interesting how Simon really backs Gregory up. I mean, which is kind of makes sense why he was so indignant when Rick invaded the sanctuary, and he kind of like tried to make his little stand of like, oh, the hilltop and whatever, and you know, Jesus like, oh, the hilltop stands with Maggie or whatever, and Simon got just threw him down the stairs, right?
Yeah, Simon's whole shtick is really the disrespect of people. You know, he has no patience for people, and it makes him almost useless to Negan. Like, obviously, if Simon isn't doing what Negan asks him to do, then Simon would be toast, because in some ways, you know, different than Gregory, at least Gregory doesn't put people in danger, doesn't put resources in danger, you know?
Right.
But Simon has a potential of, you know, corrupting or just reducing the capacity of those resources, you know, by threatening to kill people who don't comply, and you know what I mean? So not doing it, and if he's gonna kill people, doing it in a way that at least inspires others to comply, or to show, hey, me doing this to you was on you, you know, it's because you basically made me do it, you know, you didn't follow the rules, all these other people are following the rules, you know, they're fueling the economy, they're trying to be a helpful resource, these people are mad at you for breaking the rules, you know. Negan will find a way to turn it around to where he'll get everybody else to hate that person, you know, for doing what he did, you know.
No, exactly.
You know, if we're talking about this, I think it's a good idea to switch back over to Daryl and Rick.
Yes.
Because there's something that happens in that whole kerfuffle where Daryl finds the dynamite sticks, right?
Yes.
And
Daryl has this idea of, you know, using the dynamite sticks, using these explosives, and basically, you know, saying that that they finished the sanctuary off, essentially, that they use the sticks to blow it open and the walkers all flood in there, and that everyone has no other recourse other than to basically surrender. And it ends right then and there, which, from a tactical perspective, hey, I hear him.
We could be done by sundown, is what he says, right? So
yeah, I get it. Effective for sure. But one of the things that Rick brings up is that, because Daryl was there, he was a captive of Negan for, however long that period was. And, he's like, but there are workers there, aren't there? Families, that sort of stuff. And, Daryl tries to kind of say like, oh, well, they're in, they would be in this building. They wouldn't be there, whatever. But, Rick isn't buying it. He's basically
wait a minute. You know what we didn't realize is that Daryl had been in the cell the whole time. He was escorting the cell and out in the on the gates, the fence crew, by the way, as Regina mentioned.
But he also was in that crowd of people when the Amber's guy was made an example with the iron. He was there.
Was he?
He was, because he told Daryl to clean it up like afterwards.
Huh.
So he was there. He was eyewitness to some of this stuff that goes on. And remember, he was also the one to bring food to the wives and that sort of thing. Like when Carl was there with Negan with the wives in their quarters or whatever, Daryl was the one that kind of was like the servant boy to bring stuff over there. I forget what it was, if it was food or fruit or something along those lines. So I think he definitely got an idea of like, okay, there are workers. There's the kings in the castle or the warriors in the castle or whatever, and there are the workers, and they, and they're just basically workers, like they're not trying to do anything other than just kind of stay alive.
How very communist, by the way. Just something going back to the Russia thing I said.
Yes, actually, if we want to go there, yeah.
No, I went there already on episode 1 or 2 or something, but yeah, it keeps me thinking about that, like like little communist contributors contribute to society.
Well, Kirkman making his political commentary, religious. Just saying.
I still wonder though, because I hear what you're saying and it makes so much sense, but I'm trying to compare that to what the experience that Eugene got. Eugene had the full experience. He was on the floor, he was seeing all the tickets, and he was seeing. I just don't know if Daryl had the same level of introduction. Obviously, he was resistant to everything. He was he refused to comply all the way to the end. So he saw mostly the inside of a cell, serving things to people and doing fence duty, and walked around, saw punishment, and that's probably just the icing on the cake for this whole shit pie. But did he get to walk around freely and see the commerce that was going on, to see what work the workers were doing? Did he really even get to spend time on the worker floor? So
it's true. We don't know.
Contrast,
Yeah, no, it's true. We definitely don't know, but there have been certain people that have gotten insights, and it seems like they reported back, because even when Gabriel was in the trailer with Negan and the issue of the wives came up, and he mentioned, he's like, Carl said that you have multiple wives, so it seems like I get the impression that between Daryl, they've kind of reported back, their findings from being in that space. Carl probably more so, actually.
Yeah. He got the full. He got the premium tour.
He got the premium tour, exactly,
for
sure. So Rick knows that there are innocent people there that are just basically trying to do their job, and that's it.
It's the crux of their plan, actually. It's the whole concept. It's the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is where we finally see Rick waking up to the idea that, like, I've been so stupid. I've been, and this is who I was starting to become. But and then he wakes up, and they basically get into a row. You got to stick to the plan. And then Daryl says something very interesting. He says, there ain't no kingdom no more. And he says the same thing that Negan says, and he says Negan says it's to Father Gabriel, and he says it's on them. When he's referring to Rick, when Negan is referring to Rick and Rick getting everybody killed, he says, well, that's not my fault. That was on Rick.
Right.
Glenn and Abraham. That was on Rick. I told him, and he says the exact same words. It's on them for what they did. It's not my fault. It's on them, and it really drives the point home of what they're trying to do. What kind of person Negan is? Just very neurotic. It's like, it's not my fault you're an asshole. It's not my fault that you got your people killed. Like, doesn't matter that I'm the one who killed them,
And I mean, it does, we do come back to the same commentary, which is, you Ricks, we can't ever, and I don't think the show will ever let us forget that they did kill all these saviors in their sleep, unprovoked. I mean, like, that's something that the show is never going to let us forget.
It does bear repeating.
And it constantly comes up, and it is the truth. And a lot of those characters, a lot of people on Rick's team were not in good conscience comfortable with that decision. They went along with it because it's Rick, but they were not at all comfortable with taking that decision.
Right.
So,
right. And just remember where they were at, by the way, when they were doing this. They thought that this station was it. The satellite
well, they were very
station was
cocky, super cocky. Also, I mean, they just thought that, okay, we get this, and then that's it, done. I mean, they really did not understand the full ramifications of what they were doing. They didn't. They're not going to let us forget that.
as well they shouldn't too.
No.
It does bear repeating as much as possible, because it really drives the point home of how far that they were willing to damage their humanity.
Yes, how far they were willing to leave their humanity behind.
That was a quote unquote weak move, or like strong move, depending on how you look at it from Negan's point of view. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree.
By the way, chokeholds are illegal, asshole.
Yeah, I
finally caught that line.
When they were grappling, I was like, gosh, is this, what are you trying to do here?
Was that from season 1 or something? Like a callback to season 1 from when they first got into a thing? I'm trying to figure out,
I do not remember.
I wanted to rewatch some episodes of initial Daryl-Rick interactions to see what that was a callback was from. There were a couple other things too, but yeah, it's... Oh, and come on, the explosion just before... You realize that as they were fighting, Rick threw the dynamite into the Jeep.
Yes.
Before the fire started, and then the fire started and it exploded. I finally caught that. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, because now we can't use it.
Yeah, now it's like, nope, that's it. It's done.
Hear that.
Like, well, that's not an option anymore. Oh, well.
Thank goodness.
Again, the weapons of mass destruction. I'm just saying.
With great power comes great responsibility. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been seeing that, like it's gotten to, people's heads, even if it's just made them cocky and make stupid decisions. Because you could argue and say with Ezekiel the same thing. I mean, Ezekiel has nothing but the best intentions, but he was riding high on this sort of confidence that, perhaps made him lead his team to, I would say certain death. But I mean, basically, like he was cocky. He was very cocky and overconfident, and obviously we saw how that ended. So yeah, I'm just saying.
Look at what happened with Negan and Gabriel when all of a sudden Gabriel tries to go for his gun when the walker comes through, and it's this weird thing where Negan... This is why I was trying to drive the point home that Negan could totally waste Gabriel at any point in time.
Oh yeah.
Right when he disarms him, he could have wasted him.
Absolutely.
Instead, he just can't resist. Like, I'm going to keep hammering this point. He just can't resist the idea of turning out Gabriel. And I say turning out like a prostitute, but like doing that, because it's just that it's like, why wouldn't you? You're playing Mario Brothers and you see a coin. Why wouldn't you get it? Are you crazy? Like, even though it has no substantive value, there's no value to you.
Yeah.
You still get it because it's just too enticing.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that, and then again, when Gabriel grabs the gun and shoots at Negan bats it away, and then he says he just keeps pushing the confession angle, and it makes me think that Gabriel is onto him. If you really think about it, Gabriel must be onto Negan, because he keeps pushing for the confession, because I think there's this interlocking play thing. Negan wants to give Gabriel that fruitful death, so he's trying to spin that weakness into a positive, and I think Gabriel's onto him, so he keeps cat and mousing him, and manipulates him to not kill him in a way. Like, I'm this so broken and I'm so begging for this confession, which, by the way, in some ways I feel like Father Gabriel isn't as hokey as he's making himself appear to be in front of Negan.
Oh yeah.
Think about it.
I think so. I think even the little smile he gave him where it's like, I'm here, to take your confession. I'm like, it was pretty confident of Gabriel, like I was very surprised by that. Very, very surprised by that.
I do not know what he's thinking. Like with Gabriel, like where the thought process of the character. I just don't know if he's putting something on, if he's being absolutely serious. I mean, the one thing that I'm certain of is that Father Gabriel's on to Negan. He sees what it is. He sees that that Negan can't help himself from exploiting people to become a resource, not just needlessly kill them.
Right.
And if he does have to kill them, as was mentioned with Glenn and Abraham, he has to do it in such a spectacular way that it prevents people from never having to do it again. And almost in a way that the show of force exhibited makes it so that you're convinced that Negan could protect you when you're under his care. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so menacing. It's so forceful. It's just an example unto the nations, you know?
Right. Exactly.
So it's very impressive. He sees the science, and he doesn't think about it. This guy was a priest. He knows people.
He knows. He reads. He probably knows how to read people very well.
Probably also worked with children, if you think about it. I mean, not that way, but I'm just talking about the legit way. You know, and that people have weakness, and maybe that's why he locked them out of the church. Maybe they were threatening him, and that's that's why they locked him out of the church. They kept calling him, all these names and all that stuff, all the parishioners.
Yeah, right.
So he knows people. He knows the herd mentality. Oh man, I'm really starting to think more deeply about what he did. As horrible as it was, I get it. How people are weak.
Yeah, I mean, he may know very well. He may. I think that both him and, ironically, Negan are both very good at reading people, and so I think it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Wow, it really goes back to what we said at the top of the show about these disrupting characters. These wild cards, these unknowns, these people that have to catch up, the people that annoy us and frustrate us, but then you start to realize they frustrate us with good reason. They're just unique characters. Gabriel, specifically Gabriel, Father Gabriel,
for sure.
Punch in stage face.
Exactly.
That was perfect comic relief too. It's like, oh, thanks, asshole. Yeah. Thank you for the confession.
That was actually pretty funny. I appreciated that.
Here's your payment.
I did appreciate that. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I do like the fact that Negan makes a concerted effort to save Father Gabriel after tripping.
Yeah. No, he does. He could have. That's a very good point. Like, he very easily could have left them behind, but he didn't. Like, he could have left them behind as a distraction, which was one of the fears that I had. Like, I thought to myself, well, there is a possibility that he could make Gabriel into a sacrifice to distract, the walkers, and he, gets away, but he didn't.
Dwight is showing a lot more backbone and voice than he usually does.
Yes.
He's been quiet for the most part with interactions with Negan and everybody else for the most part. One word answers, 2 word orders, nothing big.
Yes.
But here he's just like, dude, you tell me what to do and I'll do it, and just, I don't need to be here. Like, shrug.
No, I think that it's very interesting. I think that but I think he's also playing his cards, and maybe he is feeling confident because of the fact that he knows that things are happening, So at the end of the day, maybe he does feel emboldened, let's say.
Oh, and he's putting his balls on the table when it comes to lieutenants too. Like, he's kind of just who is Dwight? He's not one of the upper echelons. I mean, not really. He's not an outpost leader, for goodness sake.
No.
So him putting his balls on the table like that, even though he's kind of just under Negan, still there's a prestige to, let's say, Simon, Regina, Gavin. Even Eugene. Let's say.
Right.
So who is he to kind of remind them what Negan's about? And let me remind you that Negan is. Yeah, we keep what's ours and we don't give him a damn thing. He reminds them of that, who they are in the upper echelon. It's just kind of crazy that he's the one kind of pulling people together.
He's playing a good game.
Oh yeah, and he could be emboldened anyway. I mean, if you think about it, after killing Sherry is her name, right? His wife's name. He didn't really do it. I mean, he just said he did it. I mean, he could be playing up that I'm finally free of that, so I don't have to harbor any.
I'm gonna go right. I'm gonna say right now that he didn't kill Sherry. I don't buy that for a second.
No, we know that he didn't though either.
Yeah, no, he did not. And I mark my words, Sherry's showing up season 9.
Season 9 or the end of season 8.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yep, Sherry's showing up. Mark my words.
Oh man, when you said he didn't kill Sherry, you're talking about
Dwight.
Oh, I was thinking like Scott and Gimple, because we know that she fled. He didn't go after her. Right,
she fled. But I'm saying, like, she's not dead. I don't buy that. Yeah. Like that she, because I think she said in her note, like, oh, I'm not going to survive out here. I'm like, unless we see it on screen happening, no, she's alive and she's showing up in season 9. I'm going to say that right now. I'm going to put like money on that right now.
Okay, so there's 2 things that would piss me off and the other one would be all right. But the only way I could see her coming back is if it has value to the twists and turns. So she comes back sometime in the middle where Negan still has this. They're still in war, right? Mm-hmm. And it throws everything in a tizzy. Now that would be cool. But if she just kind of comes after the fact and is with White and they're happily ever after, or it's just some stupid thing that I don't really care about, like, oh, she comes back but she's with another guy or something, or I don't know, or she comes back and they're together again and it's just all cut and dry, that would just kind of be like, okay, why did she leave? It just doesn't make sense. Like,
I will say,
I don't care that she's back, you know?
For those that have read the comic, Sherry does play a role. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm just going to put that there.
Interesting.
That's all I'm going to say.
Now you're going to have to blog about it.
Yes.
And I'm never going to read it.
Yes,
it's kind of
exactly.
sad. I really do want to read it, but I just have to keep that perspective.
I know.
You know?
I'm going to put like red tape all over him and be like, spoiler, do not read past this point right here. Right. Don't read it.
These are the topics I'm talking about, and that's it. Goodbye.
So don't read past this point.
Or like,
no,
it'll just say, Dave, don't read past this point.
Dave, don't read past this point. Just stop right here.
Everybody else will get it. Don't need to smooth them a spoiler alert.
In general, though, with this show, unless somebody is killed on screen, I would not make assumptions. I still say with Heath is another one. Season 9, he's showing up. Heath is showing up. Man. Yep, season 9.
You don't think he's going to show up? You don't think either of them are going to show up during this war?
I don't think Sherry's going to show up during this war. Heath, maybe Heath. But I just don't know how they would bring him back or where he went. I don't know. So it's like, I'm not necessarily sure. But they probably, well, I was going to say they probably don't want to wait too long to bring him back, but at the same time, they brought Morales back. So, they could bring him back in like season 14 for all we care, They
kind of brought Merle back in a weird way,
Yes, that is true.
I had this weird flash, by the way, when they were Negan mentioned the previous guy in charge. Did you get a flash of the governor for a sec?
Yeah, like sometimes I do periodically, like, and sometimes it's just based on comparison, because a lot of people obviously compare, like, oh, who's worse, the governor or Negan or whatever. So that would be a very interesting parallel, wouldn't it? Like
allowing people to be weak.
Yeah.
How weak was he?
Yeah, because the governor was not weak. I mean, the governor was another psychopath, but...
No, but in a way, he was weak. I mean, he wasn't putting away the walker heads. You know what I mean? He wasn't using his strength. He was just tethering himself to these remnants.
Yeah.
His daughter, I think, too, right? That was his daughter?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. I think that this is something that... I think this is why a lot of people have complaints with the Negan character, because with the governor, they did kind of give him some depth of character, where, he, like obviously, like a kind of reason behind the madness of like where it's coming from. Like, I mean, if you think about it, we saw a lot of the governor, like in terms of like his daughter and how, he was still keeping her even though she was a walker because he couldn't bear, like killing her. His relationship with Andrea, even his relationship after, kind of going off on his own or whatever and all that. Like, so, I mean, you got a lot of background to who the governor was, and I think that they haven't really done that as much with the Negan character. So I think that that's something that is part of the reason why people are sort of like kind of like a little sort of not completely on board with him. But I think it's not the fault of like the actor or anything like that. I think he's doing a very good job with what he's been given. I think it's just that people want to see more and understand more of what he's about in order to be able to kind of believe that he's a complex, compelling character, especially for those who haven't read the comic,
Although it's starting, as we're talking, I'm starting to make more and more sense of the relevance, like the idea of people as a resource. All the things that we've talked about in this episode, I think we're doing his character development as a result of you have to really break down the things he actually does in this episode. It belies his menacing nature. Right. He's gonna be menacing. It's gonna happen. It's who he is. Right. But this whole other like compulsive part, this part that won't let him waste people as a resource, that with every little thing that we keep bringing up, it's like this black hole that it just keeps delivering more and more examples of how, okay, now I have to go back and watch the previous episodes to see how true that is. And oh yeah, he really wanted to rope in Carl. Oh yeah, he really wanted to get all these people onto his side. The way he roped in Eugene, the way he's tried to rope everybody. He really gives everybody a chance to be a resource. But the only one one that he didn't really give that chance as much is Rick, in as much as he's allowed Rick to actually survive. And by even that token, he was able to give him all the chance in the world, instead of killing him outright, to get Rick's crew on board. They could have replaced Rick with some sort of interim head, like one of the other lieutenants, or maybe Dwight even, but for some reason, he just kept giving Rick chances over and over again, even though he's probably the most critical and brutal of him, instead of converting him into some sort of resource.
I think that Rick is the first formidable opponent that has kind of leveled the playing field. All the other people he's come across have been pretty much submissive to
like
him.
Gregory.
Right, or came to be submissive like Ezekiel, where, he basically sized him up. I personally feel, and maybe we'll find out more about this in the future, I feel that Ezekiel's story about how Benjamin's father was in a raid where they were overcome by walkers, and I don't believe that either. I think, as you can tell, I'm very skeptical. I'm like, nope, not believing that story. I believe that was probably Ezekiel's first run-in with the Saviors, and that's when he lost potentially Benjamin's father, who was supposed to be this seasoned fighter and this and whatever. Someone like that wouldn't necessarily just get killed from a walker incident or something. I mean, it could happen, obviously, but I just have a feeling that's the case, and Ezekiel probably realized the full force of the Saviors at that point and struck a deal, made a deal, right. And it worked for some time, obviously. And I think he even said it's an uneasy peace, but it's a peace.
Much like they took out Glenn and Abraham. I mean, you took out a really seasoned fighter, probably one of the best fighters that they have, and then Glenn just to give him a little misery.
Right. No, absolutely.
The widow.
Right. Exactly. And I think that Rick is the first person who has not broken. He hasn't broken him. He tried very, very hard.
Carl, right?
Mm-hmm. But he has not broken him, and he is essentially his counterpart or his peer that is giving him a run for his money. And so this is a very, very different opponent than he's accustomed to.
Right, because he could have given it the Alexandrians, let's say Regina, where the kingdom has Gavin and the Hilltop has Simon. Mm-hmm. So, what makes the Alexandria different? What makes Rick's crew different? And then Negan's like, this guy's going to be a problem. These guys are seasoned fighters. All of them know how to fight.
All of them
which is
know
like
how to
another
fight.
Topic unto itself, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's very true, because that is not the case for these situations. I mean, you see that, this is something that Rick has pointed out quite, all the time when they first got to Alexandria, that these people just were not at a capable point to be able to survive because they've been kind of sheltered, from what was going on behind like these walls. Whereas like Rick and his team has like moved from like location to location, whereas they've had to, and as for a certain point was like, living like in the woods after the prison fell, and after Terminus, I guess I should say, after Terminus, they were kind of like in limbo for a little bit until they, eventually were found by Aaron. So they have had to survive. They know how to, and they have. So they're a very different opponent than Negan's used to. He knows that these are not people that are just going to just submit. That's not going to happen. And I think he's very clear about that, especially now.
Oh yeah, yeah, that much is clear. And not only that, he's rallied all the other, like the Hilltop and the kingdom, to really fight against the Saviors, which kind of puts his whole top-heavy philosophy / organization at risk, because it's all top-heavy management, and then you have all these other people that are under him that are depending on the few people that can fight now. Yeah. So interesting.
It is very interesting.
I think that Simon's days are kind of numbered. I know we mentioned this before, but specifically when the workers were revolting.
That was very interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, that whole exchange.
That whole exchange was very interesting. I love that Gavin is feeling very apprehensive about everything that's going on. You can tell that Gavin is very apprehensive. He knows that this is like a pressure cooker situation.
Yeah, he doesn't know what to do.
No, not at all. Not at all. I wonder how he got to his point. Like Gavin, it's kind of like one of those guys like at work that you're like, how did you get here? But
middle management. Yeah,
middle management.
You literally said middle management.
It's middle management. But no, like that's what he definitely is feeling the pressure, and he is very apprehensive of what's going on. And with Simon, I think that I definitely see Simon with issues with the workers, because the workers signed up for this in exchange for what they'd be getting. They are the workers, but in exchange for protection, in exchange for the resources of food, water, shelter, the basics, essentially. Yeah. And, now you're right. And now you're seeing that, the power's been shut down, or trying to preserve, supplies or goods or whatever. And the natives are getting restless. And I think that Simon and Regina's approach is very, very volatile to these workers, and very kind of like, we're up here, you guys are down here, literally down down there. I think that they were telling them to get back to their like
Lord,
I don't know if it was exactly, where presumably it's hot. I guess they were saying that it's very hot.
Oh, because the AC was on.
Yeah,
if I remember right. Yeah,
AC in the apocalypse.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Isn't that like most of the reason why you'd be a savior? Because in a world where we're in the South and it's hot basically year round, ace and muggy.
The saviors have air conditioning, central air.
So surviving, in a prison or out in the wilderness or in Terminus or in this one big factory
or central
warehouse.
air. Exactly.
Central air.
Exactly.
Not even a choice at this point.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's pretty enticing to be a savior under those conditions, right?
Right. Exactly. But this whole sequence of events, the person that I have the most focus on here is Simon, because it's the way it comes about. He's again impatient. He's like wanting to get at the first person. That Regina does take a shot in the end, so I think that may slow down Simon's eventual demise. Mm-hmm. But there is this keen, sharp observation being made by Negan saying, "I'm disappointed in you.
Yes.
This is not going to bode well for you." So
I have to wonder what that backstory is too. Yeah, I have to wonder what that backstory.
Yeah, that backstory plus the philosophy that we've been talking about throughout the show. Simon, dude, you're willing to waste these resources. We already said at the top of the show, are we backsliding? So this is not what I want. I want to flip people. I don't want these people aren't something you can discard with at whim because it's an inconvenience to you. And if it means, and that's why what he says to Gabriel in the trailer is so prescient about their relationship with the workers. It's like, if I'm not there, I don't trust any of these guys to be able to hold on to these people as resources, because seem to be the only one who first of all cares about the philosophy,
who truly understands basically what needs to be done, and that killing is not necessarily something to take lightly. If it has to happen, it's like we talked about before. It has to happen, but it has to be in order to save numerous others, like killing one to save many others, but not just arbitrarily killing for the sake of killing. And he said it himself. He's like, if I'm not there, this whole thing falls apart. Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly what we saw. It was like, jackals just basically like ready to tear themselves apart from the inside. And I mean, these people were grateful to see Negan alive. I mean, they literally, thank God for you. Like, they were grateful to see him because he does maintain law and order. He maintains law and order. He provides for them. And so it just proved the point that he was making to Gabriel, that he needs to be there.
That Negan would make a better Trump, is what you're saying. He's the law and order president.
Yeah. Oh, God, I know. I think that Negan definitely exudes more presidential behavior, I guess.
It'd be a communist country, but, make America run again. Something, I don't know.
Jeez, that's sad. No, I think the worst comparison I heard was when they were like, well, it's like the country's starting to be governed, slightly better than maybe Cersei Lannister would. I was like, oh my God.
It's a sizable improvement from Cersei Lannister. It's sizable enough away, but very, like, in the grand scheme, kind of close to.
Kind of close to. Still in the same umbrella.
Oh, yeah. On the same umbrella of tyrant / whimsy kind of thing. On a dime, I could just, hurt somebody and then, everybody will love me. Yeah. Oh, man.
I thought it was interesting, Gabriel's pushing of the confession, but specifically in terms of his decisions with the wives. When he was kind of saying, like, Carl said you have numerous wives, and, that's because, and you can tell he was kind of walking away from him, like, sort of answering him, saying, like, oh, well, these women have a choice, it's trying to justify, his decision, because is it a choice? I mean, how much of a choice do they have? I mean, like, what are the repercussions if they don't take you up on that offer? I mean,
exactly.
Basically, like, did you have a wife before this? And, he has to basically kind of collect himself and say, Lucille, give me strength. So that was a very touchy subject. He had to kind of step away from a little bit. And,
the Lucille, give me strength is a perfect example of that. I really want to convert this guy, but I really want to kill him too.
Right now. Yeah, exactly. Because he touched a raw nerve. It was very interesting. And I think, like, we got snippets of his background for sure. And I'm sure we'll get more.
at this point, part of me is like, I don't really know if I want more. And I say that only because of the exposition that we've kind of taken on and knowing his operating philosophy, which if we didn't have this episode to really expound on this idea, then I would definitely want more. But now that we've kind of gone through it, we can also go back and see all these different examples of how, like, okay, this character isn't like a random guy. This guy isn't like a caricature. We kind of have the nuts and bolts to him. At this point, yeah, we could get more backstory, but if we did, it may even be not necessary. I think there's more of like, I don't know if I want this guy's past, and now I kind of want to know his future, you know? And maybe things will come out in the course of him either changing or leading up to his death, which is questionable, obviously, because of many different reasons. But now it's just a matter of, okay, I've gotten enough. Maybe we can stop here, and maybe we'll pick it up again some other time. But now I'm in a good place. I want to go back to your idea on the Lucille give me strength thing, because this also shows this unique strength of Father Gabriel. He's really tapping into his confessional capabilities. Like, he went for the jugular, and he kept
pushing.
And talk about threading the needle, like Gregory threading the needle with his thin dick. Gabriel knows how to do it. He's literally threading that needle. You know, he's finding the spots. He's really hand weaving himself into Negan's psyche and trying to pull out the one thing that he can just tap, and then also pull a Negan and not try to flip him, but try to kind of at least unnerve him enough to see that there's value to Gabriel. It's like this weird caduceus kind of, you know, where the snake eats itself kind of thing. Like, if I do this, Negan will see value in me, but if I do this, it'll get me closer to him.
He's walking that line. Yeah. He's definitely walking that line.
Like, they need each other. He's gotten himself to a point where they can't help but get each other. It's really cool to see if you really open your mind to it.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think he basically proved himself too. Like, he wasn't, you know, again, none of them are weak whatsoever. So I think he really kind of proved how strong and how brave he is by being persistent and going straight after him. And I think that probably earned him some respect, I would say.
Oh, for sure. So it actually does kind of bring us up to the gore thing now, where they're going up to just reach this horde between them and the sanctuary.
That's like a favorite trick they like to do on this show, isn't it? Like, every season or every couple of seasons that comes up. It's like, we're going to cover ourselves in zombie guts and we're going to be able to, like, walk through the herd for a certain amount of time. Yeah, it's like once a season.
Like in Fear the Walking Dead, they do this a lot. But
I've heard about that.
Yeah, in The Walking Dead, they do that.
Yeah, I've heard that in Fear the Walking Dead, they do that all the time.
But before they do that, there's one thing that was said that makes the end scene where Gabriel's in the shivers, and that's he's saying, like, all these bodies are out in the sun, and they get all roiled up in this heat, and the guts are gross, and man, you could get really sick from this. I've seen it. He's like, oh, I'm from Georgia, so I don't really get that. So very prescient. And so here's the thing. Does Gabriel either feign sickness because of that line? Does he hold on to that piece of information and he's faking it, or is he really sick?
I assumed that he really was sick. Like, my reaction was that, because I had been kind of thinking that he was, you know, I've said this before. It's like, how long is Gabriel going to be around for exactly? And so when I saw him get sick, or when they showed him at the end, like, shivering and kind of delirious, like talking about Dr. Carson and having to get him to Maggie, I really did think that he was sick. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. So I don't know if he necessarily is faking it. It would be interesting if he was faking it just as a ploy to get out of his situation.
Yeah, well, just given that line, because they didn't have to say that, right? You know,
they didn't have to.
We could have just taken it as gospel, like, gospel of Gabriel, that he would just get sick. Oh, okay, that makes sense. They were sick in the prison. A lot of them were sick in the prison.
A lot of them got sick in the prison.
That makes sense. But the fact that Negan actually said it says
he's seen it before.
Yeah, like, maybe he's faking it. Maybe he's taking that bit of information, like, I wouldn't know, and then now he knows. And like, oh, I didn't know what I was getting into. Wink, wink. Yeah. So it's something that you could throw up there and just say, okay, maybe he is faking. Maybe okay, because I was on board, like you said. Right. I took it for, you know, okay, he's sick. That makes sense. So, I don't know, just something to think about. And maybe there's a double plot to this. Like, okay, he sends Eugene off, and then I don't know. Maybe there's more to do here. So it's just very interesting. And then, really, I think all we really have left are the sneak peeks that we saw.
Yes.
And that's going to be interesting, because the first sneak peek we get is Rick and the Garbage People, and him basically saying, join or be destroyed.
Yeah. And I think this is where the Polaroids are going to come into play. I think he basically is going to... I think so. Like, in that respect, seeing that, I think that those Polaroids are basically kind of propaganda, but, you know, actually reality of, like, look, you basically took their side because you thought that they were the better deal and the better pony to bet to bet your money on. And, we're here to tell you, no, look what we've been able to do to these guys. And I think that that's where it's going to come in. I thought that those Polaroids were kind of come into play with them or with Oceanside.
Right.
One group or the other. But in seeing that, I'm venturing to say that we're going to see those Polaroids.
Yeah, that maybe the Polaroids are more effective in convincing the trash people.
Yes.
The trash hipsters.
The trash hipsters, yes.
Okay, I'm on board. Well, let's exposit a little bit, because do you think this is going to motivate the trash hipsters to join the cause? That's a big question.
I don't know. I don't trust these guys. That's my problem with them.
Really
it's like you need the resources, especially after what happened with the kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, because basically they had your most seasoned fighters, essentially, other than Alexandria itself, like Rick's group, and now they've all been destroyed. So now what? You need fighters. At the end of the day, they are resources, which is what we've been talking about. Like, people are resources,
right,
as long as you can get them to see your way of things. So that is definitely a possibility. I mean, I'm not crazy about them, because obviously, as we've seen, they can turn coat, at the drop of a hat.
Yeah,
but at the same time, they're resources. What are you going to do?
Yeah, so you're just explaining the stakes, but I'm kind of loath to say that two things. One, there's no question in my mind that all of these guys are fighters. Their whole makeup is kind of to show that with the slick back hair, nobody can grab onto it. With them kind of weaving in and out of the trash, knowing the terrain, it seems to me that they have a grasp on stealth. I was
going to say, that would be a very interesting, I would say, battle area, because, I mean, there's a lot of sight lines and areas where you can hide. Like, they have like a maze, you know, within that trash heap, you know? So it's interesting. It's interesting possibilities. Like, they definitely are strategic, and they had the walker that fought Rick, Winslow.
I don't remember the name.
His name was Winslow. So yeah, I mean, they definitely are much more capable of fighting than Hilltop, for example. Hilltop is not equipped for that. I mean, they will support, but they are not fighters. That is not their thing whatsoever.
I'll venture a guess too that the trash hipsters will join Rick. So like I was just trying to establish was, look, they're skilled fighters. They know the terrain. They have the idea of stealth, but they also are very pragmatic. And the only reason why they didn't join Rick is because in many ways they're not convinced that going with Rick and really trying to ruin this relationship with the Saviors is in their best interest. They must have some sort of profit sharing or some sort of thing, because like obviously the Saviors can't invade them. Their terrain is, like you said, too much of a maze, too little sightlines. They probably don't even know how many trash hipsters, as we don't, there are. So it's not in their best interest. So it's in the Saviors' best interest to strike a deal, probably for the flyer. So it's very interesting where we can go with that. The next sneak peek, though, is Maggie and Jesus. And this one's a lot more interesting. She literally says to Jesus, you should not have put us in this situation. Oh, in this position. Says, every option is on the table. And that line to me is like, okay, now we're getting a little closer to the heart of Maggie's wavering philosophy. Like, we weren't really sure where on the scale she was. Like, is she full Morgan? Is she kind of Jesus? So something's shifting, and it's shifting in the amoral position, if you want to call it that.
Absolutely, because I think that you start to see Jared or whatever, like it seems like he's like cutting his bands. It puts him in a very precarious position, because you've got people who are loose cannons. Not all, right? But still, you do have a few very dangerous individuals in that group. Elements. With people who are not fighters. The Hilltop are not people who know how to defend themselves until, from guys like this. Right.
There's a distinct possibility that they don't have quite the fighting capabilities. They were training, and there was obvious training, but how much could we train in such a short period of time?
Right.
It's not like the kingdom. It's not like they were giving the kingdom drills. They already know how to fight.
Right.
These guys are learning from scratch. Probably learning more on the lines of trying to face walkers too. Right. So I don't know if they're designed to really fight people.
No,
that's a question. I mean, Jesus can't save them all.
Couldn't help it. Couldn't help throwing it in there.
I mean that literally, but also, he's got some fighting moves, but still. Maybe we get to see them. Hey, how about that? You never know. That'd be cool.
I've said before it would be great to see, because it's one of those, I think that the Jesus character really hasn't been tapped into as much as they could. So I'd be curious to see a Jesus-Maggie conflict and where that's happening. We still don't know where Morgan is. Morgan left.
Yeah.
And he's
I'm convinced he's not coming back for a while.
Yeah, he might. Right. He might not come back until some moment where he needs to jump in and save the day. And
maybe self-sacrifice too. Who knows?
I could see that. See that.
They would do it in a way that's kind of poetic, if you think about it. Like, in the way that he says he can't die, there has to be some sort of written way, story-wise, where he can die, but only in such and such circumstance. And that would be kind of cool because, technically he can't die, but he can kill himself or something. I don't know.
Right.
Something like that.
I could definitely see that. For
that would
sure.
make more sense. Yeah. So,
and he's been there for so long. He's such a pivotal character that I wouldn't be surprised. I would think that they would do his character justice for sure, and kind of give him like a noble, like you said, poetic death. I think so.
Yeah, I mean, literally the first episode, if you remember,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So wow. I'm way more invested. Just remembering the fact that he's been there literally from the beginning, and
from the beginning, since day one.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, I mean, it's kind of like the Glenn situation. It's like you got to give those kind of characters a very pronounced send off. If you're going to send them off, it needs to be done in a certain way. It can't just be sort of like, that's why the whole Glenn dying in the dumpster thing was just not at all realistic. It's like, no, you can't just like kill off a main character like that, like such a big main character in such a sort of nonchalant sort of way.
Oh man, but we all
I know.
Almost fell for it.
I know.
And we would be like, oh, it makes sense. They do this to us all the time.
Right, exactly. Like I literally remember sitting in the basement of like our house, and like me and like my husband Eddie, like sitting there and just kind of watching it, like kind of in disbelief. Like, did that just happen? Like, wait, like did that just really happen? It's like, no, yes, no, wait, I don't know.
Wait, I don't know. They're talking about wait, it could be. Oh no, what? No.
I was like, but they didn't do an in memoriam for him.
Oh, I think they did, and then they did like a rewind the next week or something. I don't remember how they did it, but they did play it off like they did, like he did, if I remember right. I don't think they put question marks. I'm gonna rewatch that, but yeah.
Yeah, they like to play with our emotions.
And rightly so. I mean, that was a good move. It was good enough that people could accept it.
Yeah.
Even though they didn't want to. They was like, oh, okay.
I guess this happened.
I don't want to watch this show anymore, but I do.
Yeah. They were like, I guess this happened. And then it was like, no, he's alive.
Wait. Oh man.
Yeah.
But, okay. So the last thing is we do see a sneak peek of Daryl and Tara getting together and wanting to kill Negan.
I hope that this isn't another. Well, do you think this show would kill off Daryl? Because this is
entirely possible.
I think it's entirely possible, but this is another suicide mission deal. Because I'm like, we've done it before, and we've all seen how that ended up.
Like
because
twice,
I mean, this has happened numerous times, and Tara's right now on the same kind of kick that Rosita and Sasha were on.
Yeah.
Like now Tara's on this kick, so now she's all like gung ho, like whatever, we gotta kill these people, whatever. And again, Daryl is of the same mindset.
Right.
But to kind of go in and say like, okay, we're going to do this. I'm like, now you guys are just going like full on kamikaze style. Like, I mean, you're not doing anybody any favors by going about things this way. But it'll be curious to see if Daryl and Tara, if they're equivalents to that in the Saviors. Is that Simon and Regina? I don't know. Like, it'll be curious to see like if we see some of the same kind of blasphemy or mutiny among the ranks over on the Savior side too. I mean, I think that Negan's more well, Rick is aware of Daryl's thoughts and where he's at, obviously, since they had literally a fist fight over it. But I don't know if he would necessarily squash that the way Negan seems to want to, like, squash what was happening with Simon right away.
And you know what? Given our sneak peek of Maggie and Jesus, it could be that Daryl heads over to the Hilltop, which it sounds like he's doing, and then squashes whatever escape that Jared tries to take, and then maybe some other people get in the mix, and then Daryl's kind of convinced, okay, these people can't be reasoned with, talks to Tara and says, we gotta take these guys out. And that's the only way I could see them actually going through with it, is like, okay, yet another example of we can't keep these guys alive. You know what I mean? So, oh man.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see it going that way. Yeah.
But yeah, we've got a lot of exciting routes to discover right now with just everything we've called. The biggest takeaway from this episode is we could go into more backstory into Negan, but we really now have the mechanisms in which he operates.
But we
really know the inner workings now.
Yeah, we understand. We can see what the inner workings are, and I like getting glimpses of that. I definitely like getting glimpses of like, okay, this is what's going on over on the Savior side. I like it personally.
Yeah, and then we can sort of piece together what's to come as a result of all this, and really, almost in a way, kind of humanize humanize Negan because, yeah, the brutality and has a purpose, and he places kind of the utmost value on people, which is not what you would have thought in the introduction of him into the series.
Right.
So that to me is gold. That made that whole episode, all the tension and all the twists and turns, just worth every penny that I can spend. So,
yeah, I agree.
So with that, everybody, I think we can leave this show off on a good note, on a good squashy, pulverized, pureed note. And
yes, indeed.
Write us an email if you want, squawkingdeadpodcast@gmail.com. We're waiting for your phone call. We just we want to get that phone call. And we will catch you next week.
Sounds good. See you next week.